It's Daily with Jacob Albracht and Tommy Castor.
All right, welcome back in, everybody, to another edition of Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Paul Savage here with you. Tommy Castor, try and hop in a little bit later. It is a midweek edition, as it is a Wednesday, one day before we get back to NCAA tournament action. A lot of other things to get through on the program today. Glad to be here with you. The KFH hotline is open, 869-1240. We will take your comments on our video stream. You can find that on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch. We've got some emails from discussions yesterday to get through. Lots of good stuff going on today. Paul, how are you this morning?
I'm doing just fine, big boy. How are you doing? That's the big question.
I'm good. It's a Wednesday. We're almost back to tournament action. Neither tournament now, men's or women's, at the Division I level includes any Kansas teams. That doesn't mean it's not exciting and has us interested and intrigued. How's your bracket, Paul? Were you chalky this year? It was a year to be chalky.
Well, in the first 2 days, I lost 12 matches, so I'm a little over 500. That's pretty bad. Yeah, that's really bad.
No, we were all there.
I mean,
we felt like this was the year of chaos, right? It was going to be chaotic this year, and and all of a sudden, it's like the chalkiest bracket in the last 5 years.
Right. Here's the thing that what really bothers me. I was cocky about my brackets, and I said so on radio. I said, you want to make some money on this thing? Pay attention to me. Pay attention to Savage. Savage has a real feel for this year's tournament. I know where the upsets are. I mean, you look at McNeese. Come with me on McNeese. Oh, yeah, come with me. You'll do fine. Well, that didn't work out so well, did it? Kind of. But I mean, I'll tell you what. I made some boo-boos on this year's brackets. That was stupid. Just stupid.
Who'd you have in your Final Four, Paul? Is your champion alive? Who's your champion?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm doing really good with the final. I've still got 3 of my 4. I got Tennessee, I got Houston, and I got Iowa State. Baylor was my other 4. I had 3 Big 12 teams going to the Final
That's right.
4.
I recall that now.
Yeah,
Who's your champion? Who's your champion?
I've got Houston. I still liked it. Now, they won in overtime. It was a tough game.
Yeah,
does anybody think
there was adversity in that game? Cryer was fouled out. They had 2 players fouled out. I kind of like that for Houston. I've got him in my title game, so I'm with you on Houston. I like Houston. There are teams I'm pulling for, and it's pretty much as long as UConn or UNC or Duke doesn't win, I'll probably be fine. Just shake it up a little bit.
Right.
I mean, I have rooting interest. My wife's alma mater, San Diego State's in there. My mom's alma mater, Houston, is in there. I really would like to see Kelvin Sampson get one. I want Iowa State fans to get one. There's a lot of teams to root for, I think, still remaining.
Well, you've got with
really cool.
Three Big 12 teams, that still says volumes about the quality of the leagues. And there's, let's face it, I mean, there's a path to an all Big 12 finals. I mean, it's there. And right now you still have 2 potential teams vying for that Final Four deal and a championship. And I like both their odds, by the way. We've all year long, we have done if nothing else on this show, we have said, if you like defensive basketball at the college level, tune into Iowa State, tune into Houston, whenever they're on television. You're going to see kids that believe in what they're being taught, believe in what they're being coached. They understand the power of defense when it comes to college basketball. And it's really a thing of beauty because we get so many teams up and down the floor. Defending is sort of kind of optional at times, it seems like, for a lot of teams. But those are 2 teams that believe in defense. It's fun to watch, Jacob. Those teams are fun to watch. Now, I know people are going, wait a second, they don't score any points. How can that be fun? It's fun because no one else does it to the degree that they do it. Am I wrong on that, Jacob?
Listen, I don't agree with you that there's not defense. Defense is played all year long.
Well,
it's why college basketball, it's why people have gravitated to it. I think it's why I've gravitated to it. I love it. This tournament's been good. I mean, it's chalky, but we've had great outcomes, plenty of overtime. It'll be fun to watch it come down the stretch. You know who's not in it, Paul? Kentucky. John Calipari.
Well, that's obvious.
What do you make of all this? I can't. I mean, look, there are times where coaches get on the hot seat that don't need to be on the hot seat, right? Like there's that happens plenty. But I look at Cal and, he's winning at a 77% clip in his time at Kentucky. Now, they have not had big time success in the last 4 seasons.
That would be
as
correct.
far as the NCAA tournament
That's true.
goes. But he's reached, an Elite Eight twice, 3 times. He's been to the Final Four. They've won a championship. I think you're crazy if you want Cal out of Kentucky.
Right.
I think Cal, like the rest of, Kentucky, is trying to adjust to what's happening. Now, look, you go back in recent memory, right? Rick Pitino was probably, you could easily say, was better at Kentucky than Cal. Tubby Smith was as successful, didn't work with Billy Gillispie. And, Billy Gillispie, by the same sort of season Kentucky had this year, just wasn't good enough. So I get it. I get the standard being super high. I just think it's risky right now in the world of college basketball to send one of the best recruiters and one of the best gatherers of players out the door.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. The problem is that
dangerous.
Everybody that ever's going to and ever has coached at the University of Kentucky is going to be compared to Adolph Rupp. That's the measuring stick. Well, that's a measuring stick, my friend, that will never be, duplicated.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. Nobody's ever going to duplicate Adolph
comparing
Rupp's.
People to Wooden.
Comparing people to Wooden and his 9 out of 11 years of NCAA championship, whatever the heck it was. You can't do that. And here's the thing. I mean, I happened to catch a good portion of Calipari's press conference after that loss in the first round of the tournament. And he made a point in this saying, I have not figured out the NI. I'm going to paraphrase, Jacob. I'm not quoting, but I'm going to paraphrase. He said, I haven't figured out yet this NIL thing, this portal thing. I'm in the process of figuring that out. We have a problem at the University of Kentucky, and that is that our modus operandi has not been working the way it's worked with the one and dones. We get the best young talent. We bring them in for 1 year. They gel. They play. They win conference championships. They go to the NCAA and make a big run. And that worked fine because we had such top-notch quality young talent. But right now you've got this young talent, and it's not matching up with teams that have a lot of older players. For instance, against Oakland, in which they lost in the first round. Oakland, the average age of their team was 24 years of age, or the top 5 players were average 24 years of age. Calipari's team averages 19 years of age. I mean, he's got kids that haven't started shaving yet, for guys' sakes. And the maturity level is different. It's different. Full-grown men versus still young men is a very, very tough thing for Kentucky. Calipari realizes this. He's going to make some adjustments. Calipari, if nothing else, is a survivor, and he understands what it takes to win. He's going to make that adjustment. I predict that Calipari will go to the portal this year, and he's going to bring in 2, maybe even 3, what I would call veteran players, guys that have been around programs for 2-3 years. They may only have 1 year of eligibility left, or maybe they've got a redshirt year left. I don't know, but he's going to go get some mature guys that can help him, not just be leaders, but that can play as well. And there's a number of those kind of guys out there. I mean, Gonzaga just, snagged one of the best players in the portal right now, at that kid out of Pepperdine, who's going to be a great player for them. And that's what Calipari is going to do. He's adjusting to NIL and to the portal. He hasn't figured it out yet, but I think he has, after this tournament, come to some conclusions that what he's doing isn't
changing.
Working.
Paul, from my count, 2 of their players who had the most minutes this year of their rotation, I think they had about a 7 or 8 man rotation, were seniors. One was a sophomore, and the rest were freshmen. That's not a terrible mix.
Well,
and I think the question becomes more of, there was a time when Calipari could be really successful by just having the most talented teams. So when NIL started, I have been a firm believer that it will distribute talent more evenly across the country. There's a lot that's happened. Players have to play a year now in college. NIL makes players stick around a little longer, so I think you have more upperclassmen. Zach Edey's not back in college basketball this year if it's not for NIL, right? So what Cal's dealing with now is there's a lot of teams with a lot of talent. So can he coach against, if you don't have the talent disparity, can you win it? And I think that's the challenge that he and a lot of people have had to adjust to. Let's go to the phone lines real quick. Anthony on the line. Anthony, what's up? What's on your mind?
Well, I have a running joke, as far as Coach Cal is concerned, and it would help Wichita State out. I know you weren't there. Okay, I'm going to have to listen to this one. So Wichita State has a financial issue. They're paying 3 coaches. So my running joke has been this: Kentucky can help Wichita State out if they let Calipari go, and they go ahead and hire Greg Marshall and bring along Isaac Brown as his assistant, and that would thus wipe out what we have to pay them, because then that means Kentucky would take on that financial burden. But now to your point about NIL and the portal, I have a scenario, because if you notice, there were a lot of teams, and, even I, to a point, was jumping down teams for, opting out of the NIT. And if you remember, the NIT was the prestigious tournament. But I think I have a solution that could fix that problem, because we're talking NIL and we're talking portal. More importantly, the portal. If you look at the NFL, if you look at the NBA, they have a dead period where free agents can't be contacted, this and that. I think it's a travesty that when the season is over, the portal is open season. I think there should be a dead period for the transfer portal. Then you might see less teams opting out, because now what coaches have to deal with is they have to wonder about, all right, who's not coming back, who's jumping in the portal as soon as the season is over. And does that makes coaches say, well, you know what, do y'all want to play in this tournament or not? Because some players already have checked out.
Can't do that.
Over.
Can't do that. You can't do that. You know why you can't do that, Anthony? I'll tell you why. Is because you can't interfere in the financial gain of these young men. That is antitrust. That is anti.
You can do both. I think the solution. Well, you can if the players get a stipend. Teams get massive amounts of money, and conferences when teams make postseasons. So the simple solution is, yes, you come in and you set up a dead period, which everybody in the world would agree with, and say, no, when the season ends, we can get through this stuff. But you know what you do to make players want to play? You give them a cut of the pie. You give them a cut of the pie. You make the postseason. Here you get $1,000 each to come play in this tournament, because we get something to go play in it.
When I say dead period, I'll say it like this. The portal is off limits until after the NCAA and the NIT tournament, because, like I said, a lot of teams opted out in the NIT tournament. Well, if they know that, hey, I got a full roster, I might consider playing in this NIT tournament, because there's a possibility I might even be able to retain some of these players for the following season. So that's the way I look at it. If you put a dead period, say nobody can jump in the portal until after the NIT and after the NCAA tournament, then it's a totally different ball game. So that's the way I was looking at that. I'm not saying, make it for months before. No, wait till after the tournament is over, because a coach knows that, hey, okay, we might not make the NCAA, but we might get a bid to the NIT. Okay, nobody's jumping in the portal. Okay, I have a full team, but why am I going to take a team and only got 7 players left on my team? Because the other 5 of them jumped in the transfer portal. So that's
and the coaches have to spend the time in the transfer portal, so they don't want to put themselves at a disadvantage. It is a problem, Anthony. And
I think that's a win-win situation for the players and the coach. So
it is. It is if you pay the players. People will be stunned if you set. And I don't know what the share. I can't remember what the cut on an NCAA tournament or whatever. But and I won't go as far as the NIT. The NCAA tournament is the main concern. Yeah, we'd like to see people play in the NIT. But if the school gets X amount of dollars, I think people would be stunned if you went to the players and said, you can each have $1,000 to come play in this tournament. Cash, $1,000. Mm-hmm. How many people look at the NBA this year and how into that midseason tournament millionaire players were to go make a little extra money. right? That by
Right.
all accounts,
Right.
they were way into it. Scale that down a little bit. Hey, there's this
Right.
much on the line. Come play in this tournament. You can't enter the portal yet anyway, because like you've said, and I agree with, we have this dead period at least until the end of the season, for goodness sakes. And then, okay, there's that.
Yeah.
Go play.
Now,
They'll
here's
play.
one thing here's one thing I disagree with that I heard, and you may disagree with it as well too. But Jay Williams got on his little soapbox, and he was talking between what's that football player, Shannon Sharp, and I think Stephen A. And he said that the NCAA should just go ahead and expand to a 112 team tournament. I laughed at that. I'm like, what a joke. Of course, we're talking
it's
about a guy that comes from Duke.
It's irrelevant.
Too,
so. Most people think it's going to go to 80. It's irrelevant though, because they would just become play-in games like we have now into the bigger tournament that we love. So what you'd see is probably some games on Monday and Tuesday, and then you get into, and everyone's going to still think of the Thursday start. We have 68 teams now. Is anybody not thinking of this as a 64 team tournament once you get to Thursday? I mean, they're there, right? They matter to those teams, but for the vast majority of the general public, everybody only cares when it gets to 64 on that first Thursday morning. So it doesn't matter. They can add a billion teams. It's irrelevant. Nobody's going to care about the first part.
I doubt if I even watch those games. I just want to know when the main tournament starts. So
you don't watch them now. I mean, who watches the play-in games for real? Paul, I think you said you watch.
Oh, I watch.
I
watch some of the Grambling games. Okay.
So are you sad that they're there? Does it take away? No, they're there. You can go find them if you want, but for most of us, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter.
Well, let me play the devil advocate for you two guys, if you don't mind, for just a second. Just a second. That's all I need.
All right. We done poked the Baylor Bear.
There you go. So here we go. So, okay, let's go ahead and enlarge this thing. Let's double it up. 128 games. You don't need to play them at some sort of site like an arena in some other city. You seed the thing, and the top 64 play at home, and then you seed it. Now, the downside of this whole thing would be
that won't happen.
Well, I'm just saying that's the only way it could happen, because you're not going to get that many games in some arena in some
only way it's going to happen.
Well, hold on.
You have another site, Paul, to host the game.
No, I don't. Well, I just don't think you need to do that. But according to if you're going to do this and go to 128 games, I mean that's a lot of work.
128 teams
or 28 teams. I'm sorry, 128 teams. 64 games in the first round, and then you're back down to the normal size of the tournament. But on the other hand, you got to look at it this way: are you going to watch the number 1 seed and the 128th seed play? I mean, are you going to watch Houston and Morningside?
If this happens, they'll all become play-in games, I think. So, and the number that I've heard,
seed it though. You got to seed
the number
somehow.
I've heard over and over and over and over again is 80.
Well, I hear that too.
So they would just expand the play-in games, and you'd have more teams in a play-in game.
So let me ask this last question: if they expand the NCAA, more teams, let's say 80, let's say 112, let's say this is hypothetically that happens. Is there a possibility by expanding with more teams that eventually they're going to say, you know what? Why even play the NIT? Since we're letting all these teams in, there's no need for it, NIT, because
they would go away.
That's exactly what would happen.
NIT would go away. There's no question. Yeah.
It would basically, the NIT would be a play-in tournament to the NCAA tournament. I mean, I appreciate the call, Anthony, as we're behind a break here. I think your love for the NIT is not universally shared. I think nobody's terribly concerned about it. I love the NIT.
Used to be.
It's great, and I like when it gets to the Final Four. But
that's right.
That's just not what anybody's concerned about.
But it's not.
So I don't think anybody's going to worry about that part of it. I mean, there's teams to play in it if they want to. I don't know. It's hard. There's a lot that goes. There's not anything anybody's going to do though to make people care about the NIT from a viewer standpoint. From the players, you just pay them to play in it, and then they'll pay in it. 869-1240. Let's continue the Cal conversation, Paul, because I do think it represents this shift in the sport. And we've seen a lot of the old guard bail, and the fact that Coach Cal they've got his head on a stake there in Lexington is very interesting to me. But you know what? 4 years without tournament success. We'll talk about it. We'll continue at 869-1240, taking your calls. Appreciate Anthony there. Mornings here at KFH, by the way, staff enjoys a great cup of coffee from Prairie Fire Coffee. Always appreciate that support from them and that delicious coffee. We'll be back. Albracht and Savage on Sports Daily coming back next.
I haven't got all day.
869-1240.
Time to get busy.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
Welcome back in, everybody. Westwood One March Madness games are available all tournament long on the Odyssey app. Make sure you tune in, listen in. Any game you want to find, just download that Odyssey app and you'll find them right there. We're talking Coach Cal, who's going to be back next year, which I think is, I'm a little surprised we're even, having the discussion whether he should be. Last 3 years, 26 wins, 22 wins, 23 wins. A third, and a second place finish in the NIT. In the SEC. Little carryover from our last segment. In the SEC, two first round exits and one trip to the second round, but no trips to the Sweet 16. No trips to the second weekend. But again, in his 14 years at Kentucky, you've got Elite Eight, Final Four, national champion in his first 3 years. He was played in the championship game 2 years after that. Final Four, Elite Eight, Sweet 16, Elite Eight. I just don't understand. I don't understand, Paul, with all the SEC success and the conference championships. Like, we are not to the point with Coach Cal to say he's washed. Right? Like, I am pretty surprised the fan base there has turned on him. The biggest players advocate of the last 20 years, the guy who recruits, young players better than anybody. Is he, the same level of coach as Bill Self or Kelvin Sampson? No, I don't think he is. But he still gets the best players. And at the end of the day, it starts with the best players. And I don't think we're dealing with like a Penny Hardaway situation here, right? Coach Cal's got plenty left. And as the game is changing and recruiting and all of these things become important, don't you need to start with one of the guys who's the best at getting the best players? I would be very concerned. Ask Louisville, ask Indiana. Like, there's plenty of big time programs that have gone down the tube and the wrong direction when they've tried too hard. And I always say be careful what you ask for, because it's not always greener on the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Okay, you're going to get rid of Cal. Who are you going to go get?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, who are you?
Who are you going to go get?
Well, I would go get Calvin Sampson. But
Calvin Houston for Kentucky.
I was going to say, but he may not want to go. He's
not leaving Houston for Kentucky.
I mean, you're sitting at a place at the University of Houston. Like I've always said, I thought football was going to end up being very dominant at some point in the Big 12. You wait and see, and mark my words, sir. You mark my words. They are going to be good. And I'm talking about Houston. It's going to be good in football, because you got a population base of 10 million within 100 miles of the city of Houston. There's a lot of football and basketball players within that geographic area. So I'm just saying that he wouldn't want to leave. But how many teams? I mean, and I hated to even think. Maybe should I say this, because I could get myself in trouble? I'm going to go ahead and say it. Will you defend me? Defend me if I get in trouble. And you were there's been a lot of teams that said, "Oh, we got rid of whoever it is, Rick Pitino, whoever it is," and then you get to a point where you say, "Oh gosh, maybe we should have done that." Well, how about Greg Marshall? I'm just throwing that out. I mean, I don't even know if that applies or not. But
it doesn't. Kentucky's not hiring Greg Marshall.
Well,
I just like Kentucky. That's the thing. Like, first and foremost, when you make a decision like that, if you're a fan and you want that coach to be gone, you have to be able to tell me, like, who are you getting next? What
Shaka
highly
Shaka Smart, maybe?
You love Shaka. You're
didn't say
really
I
proud of what
loved it.
Shaka Smart did at Texas.
Well,
like I just that's the problem. Like, you have to start that conversation with, okay, who are you going to bring in instead? You have to also understand the buyout for John Calipari and the evolving world, knowing at some point soon, probably, Players are going to have to get paid. These schools can't do $30 million buyouts forever or whatever they are. It's just not financially feasible if they have to also pay players at some point, which they probably will soon.
Well,
So, like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, none of it makes sense to me to fire Cal other than a fan base that doesn't have a real great grasp of reality, right? He has been good enough to keep his job. And far more than that, he's still getting great players, right? It doesn't make any sense. You have to have a replacement if you're going to make that kind of radical decision, which they don't. There's no guarantee who they would go get. Who would you go get?
Yeah.
And I get it. It's one of the best jobs in the country. I'm not saying it's not that. I'm just saying you have to guarantee me you can get one of the top guys. You're not going to go as Kentucky and go hire some top-level assistant somewhere. You're not going to go hire some retread. This is Kentucky.
Right. Well, you just said that it's one of the best jobs in the country, and I guess it is, but I can tell you it might be the most pressure-packed job in America.
If what Cal's doing at Kentucky right now is not good enough, you think a coach that's having a lot of success and doing his thing is going to just rush into that situation? There'll be plenty of people that want the job,
right?
But you just can't. Like, it would be one thing if Kentucky was just been in Louisville's situation. They finished third, and second the last 3 years in the SEC, Paul.
Yeah.
They have not found a lot of success in the NCAA tournament. There's not a lot of teams that find success in the NCAA tournament. It's the ultimate crapshoot. It's the ultimate wild card. That's why we love it.
Right.
You cannot base the future of your program on getting bounced in the NCAA tournament a handful of times.
Yeah, one a year. That's what we're talking about. One winner a year. That's it. One. You get one. That's it. You get one in a decade. That's pretty darn good. That's pretty good odds. I mean, that's better than odds that anybody else is getting. You get one.
It makes what Gonzaga, for instance, with all the straight, however many straight years now to the Sweet 16, even more remarkable. The fact that Bill Self has not had a first round upset in whatever it is, an even longer amount of time. Like, those things become amplified and impressive and incredible in their own rights, but that's not a standard to hold teams to. It's just not. And look, Kentucky fans would sit here and say, yeah, well, we're the best. We're Kentucky. That's fine. But you just can't do that. Like, you can't chase a coach that's still having this level of success in recruiting. Number one, first and foremost, right now in this changing landscape. Number two, he's been the biggest advocate in favor of what's happening right now anyway. And number three, they're finishing high in one of the best leagues in the country every year.
Right.
You can't base the entire everything based on a couple of games at the end of the season in the most wild tournament that exists. That's crazy to do that.
Yeah. And let me add on to what you're saying, and that is that in the 2024 recruiting class for Kentucky has 3 of the top 25 high school basketball players in America. 3 out of the top 25 are going to Kentucky. Think about that for a second.
And Paul, they're only going to get stronger in the portal because they're going to have as much NIL backing for men's basketball. I mean, they're going to be right at the top of the mountain with Kansas and Duke, probably North Carolina. Right. Just a small handful,
right,
of universities around the country value men's basketball more than football.
Yeah,
there aren't very many.
What a combination, too. I mean, you tell a young man who's in the top 25 of recruiting for the 2024 class coming out of high school, and you say, you come to Kentucky. Not only will you be paid one of the best at the best rate that's possible at the University of Kentucky, we will be equal or better than anybody else in the country, but also you're going to compete for a national championship. You're going to get a lot of eyes on you, and the more eyes that go upon you, guess what? Your NIL even jumps from there with regards to deals. And by the way, over the last couple of years, and I'm saying the last couple of years because I don't have specific numbers. I mean, it has not been uncommon to see 1, 2, 3 Kentucky players doing a national ad for somebody. I can't put my thought process to recall anything particular, but I can remember seeing them and thinking to myself, University of Kentucky. That's why that young man goes to the University of Kentucky, because you see him on TV on a commercial, and that only enhances. But right now, you get rid of Calipari right now. Who's to say that those three recruits that are in the top 25 decide they want to stick with whoever they bring in and go to the University of Kentucky? Because there'll be some other jobs, or I said jobs, but other programs that could look very attractive, much if not more than the University of Kentucky. But they go to Kentucky because, one, the money's going to be good. Two, they're going to play for a national championship. And three, Coach Calipari is one of those guys that can get you ready for the NBA. And that's a big sales point. He'll sit down with a kid and say, I will get you ready. Not only will you do well at Kentucky, I will get you ready for the NBA. And that's huge.
By the way, Paul, I have it as 4 top 25 players.
There you go.
And another inside the top 50 and another inside the top 100.
There you go.
They'll go be aggressive. They have the second best class in the country, according to 24/7. Second best.
Who does it say? I'm not on that article. Who's got the top class right now, according to whatever your source is?
Duke.
Duke. Not surprised.
Duke.
There you go. I figured it'd be Duke, North Carolina, somebody like that.
Duke, Kentucky, Alabama, Rutgers, a bit of a surprise. Arizona, Missouri, Baylor, Kansas is up there. Kansas will get much stronger as they hit the portal. The thing that I had worried about that's not playing out with Coach Cal is that advantage he's had in recruiting would shrink, right? It doesn't appear to be doing that.
Doesn't.
Now, I don't know how that'll work in the portal. We haven't had enough time to truly evaluate that yet, but it's wild to me. Like, what's our standard? And I've always wondered this with the NCAA tournament. I've always kind of said, if you make it to the second weekend, like if you make it to the Sweet 16, that is the icing on the cake of a great season, right? Some teams probably have bigger expectations than that. I think they're unrealistic when they are, though. And look, Kentucky hasn't made it to that second weekend in a little while. But I don't think you can ignore the fact that they're at or near the top of the SEC almost every year. That's one of the top leagues in the country. Like, you have to look at overall bodies of work. You just do. Or it's not going, or you're destined to fail. Teams, whether it's football, whatever it is, teams that have higher standards than that, you're setting yourself up to go down that road like Indiana's been in for an eternity now, where, yeah, you were a blue blood once, but man, that goes away quick.
Right. Well, let me throw a question on you real quick. I get your opinion on this. No right or wrong answer, obviously. But if there wasn't a $33 million buyout for Calipari, there was not that hanging over the head of the university or the athletic department, what do you think? Would you go ahead and release him?
Absolutely not.
Okay, I was just asking.
Because who are you going to replace him with?
That, maybe a Kentucky can go get a
Mark Few's not walking through that door.
But I was going to say, well, maybe he does if it's the
He doesn't.
Okay.
Not happening. No chance. It's not going to happen. That's the top problem is, who do you replace him with if you go? You know why Penny Hardaway, at least I don't think, is in any danger whatsoever, Paul?
Why? Because he
still gets the best players. Because he still gets the best. You got to start with getting the best players. And then go from there, right? It's wild to me.
And you've already said Calvin Sampson's not going because he would be he's the first guy for me that comes to mind. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but he comes to mind for me.
Maybe to the NBA at some point. Why? He's had the number one team in the country all year.
Well, I got
playing in the best league in the country.
Yeah, in one of the biggest populated areas in the country as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. He's not doing that either. All right. I'm glad I'm not in Kentucky radio. They'd be outside with pitchforks right now.
Oh, they would.
869-1240 is the number. We'll bounce around a little bit, hit some topics around the rest of the sports. We're talking NIL and recruiting. KU's interested in a player that has local interest here in Wichita. Wichita State loses another very noteworthy player. We'll talk about those things as we make our way through a midweek edition of Sports Daily. go in 3, 2. ESPN Bet is ready to take you through all the huge sports moments this spring. The exclusive sportsbook of ESPN has it all, including offers and promotions from Scott Van Pelt and Stephen A. Smith. There's no better time to be a sports fan. New users get $100 in bonus bets for making any sportsbook bet. Download ESPN Bet today. What a play! Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER in partnership with Hollywood Casino at Kansas Speedway. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details. What'd you get that at, Chad? I had it at 3116, but I started talking just a split second. Okay, can we get that to Tony and just have them make sure that's okay before we leave today? Thank you. All right, welcome back to Sports Daily here. Jacob Albracht, Paul Savage. Glad to be here here with you. Rick chimes in on our discussion, says, since college sports are just all about NIL and money, these players should all have to pay for their school. Obviously, a scholarship is worth nothing, and it's all everyone wants to talk about. Rick, I couldn't disagree more with that sentiment. Do we hold our, if there's a kid on campus and they are, and I use this example a lot because it's an easy one to make. Let's say they're a great musician and they're in school on a scholarship, right? Great musician. Do we, if they go and try and join the local orchestra or go play at a bar to make a little extra cash, do we say then, oh, you know what? You don't need that scholarship. Let's just get rid of that scholarship. We have to stop holding athletes to different standards than every other student on campus. And you know what else about that? That music student, if the local, I don't know, guitar shop wanted to come down and have them come in and play and sign autographs, you know what they could do, Paul? That. They could do it. Like, let's stop with this. Let's stop making athletes different than every other college student because they're more valuable. They're just more valuable. Great. We got to get over that. Doesn't mean they don't deserve a scholarship. Take the scholarship and the NIL because somebody's with the open market's telling you that you're worth that. We have to stop with all that. It's coming. It's coming. They're going to get paid too. You have to get over that too. Like it's going to happen. So it's just they are just worth more simply because they bring more value to the university. That's all. Like that's just the bottom line. That's all it is.
Well, it's interesting how you put it that way because it sounds like that one of these days school is not going to be a requirement of playing.
Then that's a problem.
And
I have a problem with that.
Well, but it sounds like and by the way, I guess that's the only reason if you were to make a case, why do you still need the NCAA?
You have to have an enforcement agency.
I guess
yes.
so. I guess
I've always said that.
Now, as far as I'm concerned, I've kind of been of the opinion I don't like the NCAA. I think they've been a detriment to student athletes for many, many years, including going back into the days when I was playing and back into the days when you were covering it as a young Cub reporter at West Texas State University. Even then, the NCAA was, a problem, a big problem. Yeah. And in fact, a detriment to the lives of young student athletes, if you ask me. That's my opinion. But it's still going to have a place for this kind of thing because I really don't think we want to get to the point where basically we're running a college
professionals. Yeah, no, I don't like that idea. I don't like that idea.
I don't either.
Mike says if the school pays them, they should pay for school since it's a job.
What,
Mike?
Well,
guess what I did when I was in school, Paul?
What?
Guess what I did when I was in school?
What'd you do?
I worked for the school and got paid. Did that compromise any grants or anything I had going?
No.
Of course not.
And it probably helped you turn professional in what you wanted to do for a living. I'm guessing.
It absolutely did because what I did there. Yeah, you're 100% right.
That's what
Paul,
I'm thinking.
If you're a math major and on scholarship, and you are what are the people that live at the dorms that run the dorms, the students that live there? What are they called?
Residents.
Yeah. That guy or girl. Guess what happens?
Student residents. Yeah.
School pays them. They might get room and board for free.
Yeah, they get.
Does that compromise their scholarship?
Yeah, no, that's money. Yeah, and that's exactly right. Because after all,
why are we doing this?
Right,
like it's ridiculous.
Right, because I know to go to Baylor right now, you're looking at basically $100,000 a year. I mean, I think that's about it. It wasn't that.
That's a different problem. But that's a different problem.
But those student athletes at Baylor University are getting $100,000 a year in essence.
Maybe that's why you're so much smarter than me, Paul. Because your school costs that much more.
Well, I don't.
Let's go to the
KFH
hotline. Right. Let's go to the KFH hotline. Mike's on the line. Mike, what's up? Welcome into Sports Daily.
Good morning. Hey guys, it's Mike from Vipe, but I'm not calling about high school stuff.
Well, good, Mike. How are you?
I'm good, guys. How you doing?
Good.
Hey, I listen to you guys almost every morning, and I hold my tongue whenever we start talking about NIL. So I'm gonna throw my I'm gonna throw my 2 cents out there.
Attaboy.
What people seem to forget is NIL is basically for 1% of the college athletes. I mean, it was set up basically, frankly, by the media companies so that those 1% that are probably going to play professional sports are going to stay in college. I mean, that's kind of what it was set up for. And when you look at it, only about 1.5% to 2% of every college athlete goes into pros anyway. So for the rest of the college athletes, that education piece is still pretty important. So is that scholarship piece. The other thing that drives me crazy is that there are only about 20 NCAA Division I schools that have a profit. That means about 212 of them don't make money in their athletics. And what NIL was set up for, the purpose of NIL was to allow kids to make money on their image and likeness. And I agree with that 100%. What the Cavender twins are doing is outstanding. What Livy Dunn does is outstanding. What Grady Dick did was outstanding. But that was somebody coming to them, an advertiser, a media company, a car dealership, a sportswear company, and say, we want you to represent our product. You guys brought up a great example just a second ago. The music student who is on scholarship for music school gets a gig at a local bar. He should be able to go out there and do it. The problem with NIL, it's become a check writing machine. It's CAC. It is pay to play. It's not name, image, and likeness anymore. When you've got an athletic director for a Division I college that goes on media and asks all of his fans to donate $500 to the collective, that is not so a kid can have their name, image, and likeness represented. That's so they can write a check to a player.
They're two different things, but I would ask you this, Mike, what is the problem with that? And I've always wondered this, and I ask you that because you brought up the point that athletic departments operate in the red a lot. Now, I think that happens because there are other expenses on campus that are absolutely absurd. But I would ask you, if fans want to do that to help bring in athletes, what's wrong with that? Because if departments can't do this anyway, eventually what's going to happen is players are going to get paid. So if you've got to find a pool of money that doesn't exist, what's wrong with fundraising that money? Here's another example. Who do you think paid the vast majority of Greg Marshall's massive contract increase? You think that was the school paying the biggest portion of that? No, absolutely that money was raised privately. So why is that fine? But when that's done for players, it's not okay. Why are we so opposed to that?
I separate what the spirit of NIL, the whole idea of NIL made perfect sense.
Well, we can call it whatever we want, Mike. Like you can call it NIL, you can call it booster money. I don't care what you call it, but who cares if boosters want to chip in a bunch of money to pay these kids? Like, why does that matter?
I think it will matter in the long run because I think you're going to end up with 20 or some schools who are going to be able to handle that model. I mean, let's just see how well Wichita State handles this model going forward. How much money are they going to be able to get through the collective to go out and bid on players that Gonzaga wants, that, schools that are what we used to call mid-majors that are in the same boat that Wichita State's in, but have much higher profile programs. How are they going to be able to compete for those kids? And I
would say that Creighton's done it, right? Creighton and Gonzaga are good examples. But remember, Mike, Wichita State raised that money to pay their coach among the top 5 at the time in the country. If they can do it to pay a coach, I'm confident that if the product on the floor has people excited, they can do it to pay a player. We've seen it from Wichita State fans before with Greg Marshall's contract.
I think one of the main, and this kind of goes back to Cal, a reason to pay a coach that much is also for his ability to recruit those kids to come to that school. Even with the NIL money involved in that, you've still got to have that unbelievable
Absolutely.
Recruiting,
Totally
recruiting
agree.
capability. I just
Totally agree.
I have a kid played college basketball at Missouri S&P, one of the most expensive schools in the region. She got 4 years paid for. She got $300 a month to spend on food and stuff like that as a stipend. I couldn't be more happy about how much money she made.
Yeah.
But she was never going in today's world. with NIL, she would have never gotten a paycheck for that. Nobody, yes, if the money, and that's the other thing, the money is going to the school from all these donors, so they're not necessarily writing a check to the kid. Then it becomes incumbent on the school to write the check to the kid. They're not going to be able to write a check to every kid, because I don't think you're going to have a situation where schools are going to say, hey, we're going to bring in $5 million and we're going to divide it evenly amongst all the athletes. They're going to
it won't be even. It'll be value based. It'll be value based. There's no, but it always has been. I mean, it always has been. We appreciate the call, Mike. We're up against the hard break on the hour. Call us back. I love the discussion. It's always been one of my favorite things to talk about, and people that listen to this know that, but we'll get into it. Mike, we appreciate it. We're on a hard break here. We're going to take it. We'll come back. We'll continue all our discussions when we return on Sports Daily.
I'm Ted the Sports Head.
Now, from Wichita's most listened to sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH. This is Sports Daily with Jacob Albracht and Tommy Castor.
All right, welcome back in, everybody, here to Sports Daily. Glad to be with you on this Wednesday. We've been talking a lot about college basketball. Coach Calipari's coming back. I've been pretty surprised that there was as much of a call for his firing among those fans as there was, but he is coming back. It's got us discussing, quite frankly, a lot of things there in the first hour that didn't even intend for it to go to, but it's interesting whether or not you think Cal is going to be successful in this new era. A lot of the older coaches, Coach Krzyzewski is out. Jay Wright is out. Jim Boeheim is out. And granted, those guys were a little older, but, we've seen Tom Izzo probably, lack a little in recruiting from what he used to be, but they're still successful because he's a great coach. And, where does this all fit in? And it brings up Kansas. I've long contended Kansas has always been the best at balancing all of it, balancing older players with elite freshmen, with great coaching. That's why I've always said Bill Self's the best in the business at it. And I think they're going to be very aggressive this offseason when it comes to the transfer portal and NIL. Kansas was very unlucky this past season, Paul. They put way too many eggs in the Arterio Morris basket. That was their own fault for doing that. They had significant injury to Kevin McCullough, who was their best player, and they missed on Nick Timberlake. As a transfer, he just didn't do what they thought he would do, and quite frankly, he was asked to do more, I think, than they initially thought he would be asked to do.
He had moments.
Yeah. He had some nice moments late in the season. It was just a little bit miscast from what they brought him in for.
I got you.
I'm not too worried about any of that big picture. I think they will go get some of the best, transfer guys this year. We'll see who comes back. They may have to rethink the construction of the roster, but it brings us to something we saw yesterday in that, there was a reporter talking, just very simply put out there, teams that have contacted Colby Rogers of Wichita State. And one of those teams was Kansas. And I said it from the beginning when I was on the road with a bunch of KU fans and Colby Rogers entered the portal and it was kind of a bummer. And then you're like, well, you know what, though, I kind of get it. For the timing for him and his career, Wichita State, that would have been a tough ask, honestly, for him to come back because he'll be so highly touted. You've got a guy that, shot the three-pointer from 41% roundabout this past season, scored 16 points a game. He's exactly the kind of player Kansas needed this past season. I think he's athletic enough to be at Kansas for sure. And it makes a lot of sense. Colby Rogers then retweeted that basically. So, it's true. And so, look, we get into this and you look at it and Colby Rogers to Kansas makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, Paul? Like, I love that fit. It would be fun for us to see it, I think. But as that list of names comes out and Kansas tries to navigate this offseason, I don't know where Colby Rogers ranks in the transfer rankings. There's a little bit of fool's gold involved in that. But it is interesting to see him rumored there and the value that he now brings. And we talked about it yesterday. What does Wichita State need to do to keep the players like him? And we'll talk to, Paul Mills about that on Friday as he joins the show. But Colby Rogers to Kansas, does that surprise you? I mean, there were a ton of, high major, power conference teams on that list, but the one that stands out to us is Kansas. But, I mean, there you go. Guys like that, programs like that. Kansas isn't going to sit back. They're going to go be as aggressive as they can be in the portal, and they're going to reconstruct their roster, and that's what it takes now in college basketball.
Right. And I think when you look at the old guard, and when I speak of the old guard, I'm talking about the Caliparis, the Selfs, some of the guys that are already in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. Those kind of guys are adjusting a little slower to the NIL and all the things that go with it to then maybe some of the other younger coaches who understand what it could mean, because you have a tried and true system in place, like the University of Kansas, like the University of Kentucky. These are tried and true, and you're still feeling your way out. You're going to figure it out. Mark Few, I think, has had some pretty good success, probably a little more than these schools with regards to getting guys in. He just signed a kid out of Pepperdine who is, by all accounts, a stud, averaged 17, 18 points a game for Pepperdine this last year. They've got some other guys on the line. We've got coaches that have been doing this for a long time, still figuring out what NIL is and understanding that the way they've done business up to this point, Jacob, is not going to work. NIL is different. NIL is changing the way you approach basketball now, and it's having a major effect in basketball. We can see that effect, but it's not having the effect of, say, football. Football is a whole different beast. I mean, football, the teams that are spending the most on NIL, we see them having success. We understand why they're good. We understand why they get, the star quarterbacks from the high school ranks and the name brand, the quarterbacks by the name of Manning, if you get my drift. We understand why they're all getting those and why they're having that success. Basketball is still a little bit of a learning curve. And Bill Self, of all the people that you and I follow, he's going to figure it out. He's going to understand. He's going to know what they're getting. And we were talking to Mike just a second ago, and when we were talking to Mike, he's got to understand, because do you remember up to even 2 or 3 years ago? Do you remember me telling you off the air? We didn't really talk about it for like a year, but I was telling you, well, this kid from Mays, or this kid from East, or this kid from wherever you're looking at around the area right now is offer from, you name the Division I college football program. He's at about 250 right now, 250,000 a year for 4 years. Remember and we didn't really talk about it because there was still so much we didn't know. And that stuff is going on to this day, only the numbers are getting bigger. The numbers are getting larger than what we were talking about. But you and I, we knew this was coming, because we knew for a fact these offers were in the pocket of these players. And we knew that because we know so many high school coaches. We have a lot of contacts. And you have a coach that says, this kid's got offered this from this school and this much from this school. You could take that to the bank. That's what's going on. So Bill Self is figuring it out. I have a lot of confidence that he'll understand it. KU will be better. He's not going to let happen what happened to him this year, to where basically he had at any 1 point 7 or 8 players at the most that he could put into a game and still have success. He's not going to let that happen again. He's figured it out. They're all figuring it out. Tom Izzo is even going to figure it out. Old dogs will learn a new tricks, or they will not be in the game very much longer. So it's all coming full circle. But I'm not sure even you or I, and we kind of have an idea what's going on. I'm not even sure we can see where the future lies, do we? I can't really tell. Maybe you can. I'm
no,
not
I mean, I
quite
think,
sure.
look, I
I'm
think
not
we're
quite sure I know.
I think we're getting a pretty good look at it right now. I think we're getting a pretty good idea of what eventually it's going to be. And there's a lot to it in sort of, where your teams fit into it is what we're trying to decide. We know where Kansas is going to fit into it, right? Like if Kansas, Colby Rogers has a chance to go be a star. Look at Kevin McCullough. Kevin McCullough before the injury, Paul, was, he's like a Naismith candidate.
That's right.
Kansas is going to have the ability to go take really high-level players and put them at that ultimate place. And it's not, we've seen that for years at Kansas, where guys enter their junior and senior seasons, whether they were homegrown guys or from somewhere else, have become these amazing players under Bill Self. That's not going to change, right? It's the roster construction that gets a little bit trickier. I don't think Kansas is going to lose a lot of players to the portal that have defined roles, right? There won't ever be, at least I don't think, players that enter the portal from Kansas 90% of the time that we kind of didn't see coming. You know what I mean? Like if they leave Kansas, probably it's because they need a bigger role somewhere else. But I don't think we're going to see this situation with Colby Rogers ever happening to Kansas. Well, so I don't think they're I don't think their role in the landscape of college basketball changes very much from what it always has been.
Mm-hmm.
They've always been this way.
Right.
Now, some of those juniors and seniors might come from somewhere else, but I think Kansas will always be led by an upperclassman. They'll always have the bigger roles, and then you'll have young talent sprinkled in, developing as they go. I don't think anything about that's going to change at Kansas. And I think, quite frankly, they're going to be very successful in that model like they always have been.
They will, but you're still going to see some movement with the portal with regards to kids that, because the kid, if you're a kid and you end up going to the University of Kansas on a scholarship, you've been told all your life you're one of the greatest basketball players since Bill Russell. You know what that or Wilt Chamberlain.
Well, nobody uses that reference with nobody uses those references with young people anymore. Just
well, I got you. But you get my point. You're pretty darn.
Names aren't coming up on the recruiting
trail.
trail.
You're just as good as Michael Jordan. How's that? Is that better? There you go. You're as good as Michael Jordan. But with that being said, and then you get to the University of Kansas, you get to the University of Kentucky, wherever you're going, it's the blue bloods of the world, the Dukes. Now all of a sudden, dang, I'm pretty good. I've been told I'm pretty good, and I'm not getting the playing time I need. Well, something, I'm going to look at the portal. Those are the kind of kids you're going to see that the portal, it may not even have so much to do with money as it does with, I'm not getting the playing time that I think I should get. I want to go find that place. I can still go find me a really great Big 10, SEC school, Big 12 school. I can find a lot of schools that will take me. And that's where you're going to see those changes. But you're still going to see kids leave. All schools, every school, they're all going to leave, because you can't make a basketball roster everybody on that team happy. It's nearly impossible. Everybody thinks they need more playing time.
I think it's cyclical.
Everybody thinks they should be a starter.
Kansas will lose players because they don't have playing time.
There's no
They always have.
They will.
They always have.
That's right.
Tyus Grant Foster was just leading Grand Canyon, right? Like, they'll always lose talented players.
Right.
That's not the where the cycle happens is what's interesting. And that's what has me interested in Wichita State. Like, what will Wichita State's role in this be? Will Wichita State be able to get back to a position where it doesn't consistently lose its best player? They'll have to have A, more success on the court, and B, a great NIL positioning to do that. I think that they can get to that point. But when we think about where teams land in all this, the reason I still think the talent will spread out is because, let's say, for example, Elmarco Jackson and Jamari McDowell, two very talented freshmen for KU this year, who are on a trajectory to need to be like 3-4 year players at Kansas to be their best. Let's say they're like, you know what? Nope, I got to go somewhere where I get a bigger role.
I got you.
Okay.
Right.
Doesn't Wichita State then factor back in, if they're in a good position, to now land the caliber of recruits they were never in position for to begin with? So at its peak, can Wichita State, A, not lose its very best players, and B, be in a position for some of these young, insanely talented players who had smaller roles to come in then? And I'll tell you the thing that has to get figured out in that I don't know how they'll do it, because it keeps losing in court, is you restrict transfers to like one time for free, and then the other times you'd have to sit out. And I don't know how that's going to happen. It may not be able to happen, because then you'd be in a, then the cycle gets to, well, Wichita State takes in that maybe 5-star that needed more playing time, and then as they get them more playing time and they get good, then they just leave again and go somewhere else. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the cycle that worries me to some degree. So, and I don't know how you solve that right now. Like, that's sort of a macro problem, not a micro problem. So how do you get Wichita State first and foremost into the position that they don't lose their best players? I think two things have to happen. You have to be better. You have to say, Colby, we're going to be in the NCAA tournament next year. You won't find a better opportunity. Oh, by the way, we have a great NIL situation to help you out. Those two things are what have to happen at Wichita State.
Right.
But I think Wichita State, if they can start winning again, are going to be fine in this model. Because, yes, it stinks sometimes to lose your top players, but there are so many great players out there right now. So can your coach take in new players every year and get them turned around quickly? That becomes the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
And so,
go ahead.
Paul, back to the original point of Cal real quick. Cal's been doing that his entire career, right? He's been bringing in 4 or 5 new players that have to become starters for him forever. That's what he's always
He's
done.
always done that. He's done that for the last 10 to 15 years. That's just that's the way he operates.
So his style actually fits the new model. It used to be an oddity, right? There was only Kentucky and really Duke that were doing it that way,
Mm-hmm.
that were bringing in just tons of freshmen every year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and there's I understand there's a difference in freshmen and upperclassmen.
That's right.
Totally.
Physically.
But in the sense of just new faces every year, that's where we're going to see the coaching separation now. Which coaches can take in new players every year and quickly get them on the same page?
And
those will be the coaches that have the most success.
Right. It's going to be interesting the way you have phrased this, is because, for one thing, it's also about winning. And I love that comment, because you're exactly right. Nobody wants to go where you're not going to win. Not winning is not fun. Not winning does not equal NIL either, does it? And so, with that also being said, at the University of Kentucky, they're still selling out every
They're
night.
Gonna be fine.
They're going to be fine. Wichita State, you need to get the crowds back. You need to get the money back forward. You've got to get the atmosphere. Remember, at one point, the guys that would come in and broadcast games at Wichita State. Oh, the atmosphere here! And boy, they're right. I mean, you're in there with 10,500 screaming meanies, and it's going nuts. It's something, and you got to get that back. But that comes with winning. You got to get that back, I think, at Wichita State, and I think everything will come to fruition. Everything will be fine. But man, that's a big task, isn't it? Because you're going to recruit with NIL. So's everybody else in the world. They're all recruiting with this stuff, and you got to figure out how to fit your niche.
Okay, let's we're going to talk Shockers, because they had another portal entry, not Colby Rogers, but another one. Kenny Poto's in. We'll talk about that, what that leaves on the roster, what it means, and what we think about those things happening right now with the Shocker basketball program. It's Albracht and Savage. Let's give away some HTO on the way out. A free iced tea featuring the new seasonal delight strawberry passion. You've also got free rain coffee now, and you can get an opportunity to win one of each of those, either Wichita location or in Derby.
Ooh, I like it.
Free tea, free coffee right now to our first caller on the KFH hotline, 869-1240. We'll be back. More Sports Daily right after this. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Congratulations to Rob for winning some HTO iced tea and Brewhouse coffee, now featuring free reign. Paul, Wichita State, lose another one, Kenny Poto. It's been an interesting discussion among Shocker fans on, I think, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think with the emergence of Quincy Ballard, I think we expected probably a little bit more out of Kenny Poto and growth that didn't happen as much this year. So I think they're going to be fine, but it does open up another spot. So what we have currently are 4 open spots. Rogers, Abide, Ricks, Poto are out. You've graduated Original and Germany. Everybody else, as far as we know right now, returns. And I think there's a decent chance that holds true. And then you've got 4 spots. You've got 2 incoming freshmen on some of those. There are 4 open scholarships by my count. We'll talk to Kevin Saul and Paul Mills about the exact numbers on that on Friday when they join the show. 4 spots to bring in out of the portal feels just right to me. If they can keep what they've got now, and I think a lot of roles, and look, they were a better team this year than their record indicated, certainly. I think we feel that way, right? They were in enough big-time games. That 4 open spots with Colby Rogers' role going out the door and that opportunity basically being there, and in the minutes of Kenny Poto going out the door and that opportunity being there, I think there's room, I hope, for at least 2 fairly high-end transfers in that. And then you can go and, maybe get a couple of developmental guys or just, role players, those kinds of things. But I think Wichita State, if I'm just trying to gauge it, and it's what's so hard to do right now, if the NIL situation's in pretty good shape, Wichita State's is a pretty attractive spot, assuming the NIL positioning is pretty good.
Yeah.
Because roles are there for, players looking for them. Now, again, we got to temper expectations. Like when you've got high-end South Carolina players coming into the mix, that's not going to be the player that then probably comes to Wichita State. So the roles there are probably and likely coming from smaller schools, would be my guess. And then you can go back and look for like the Harlem Beverleys at the big schools who just weren't getting the playing time. But I do think there's an opportunity to go recruit hard, high-end mid-major players that are just looking for a step up in league or whatever it is. I think there's space for that on this Wichita State roster.
Right. And all through the tournament, we heard schools mention where kids had transferred in from places like, High Point, places like,
sure.
Well, I mean, all throughout the tournament, we heard,
look at Colby Rogers.
Yeah. Hillsdale College comes to mind with the kid from Oakland who was, just deadly at the 3. Hillsdale College, who would have ever dreamt somebody from the portal would make such a big impact in the first couple of days of the basketball tournament. And so it's very, very fascinating, very, very interesting. And the needs at Wichita State, I mean, you need somebody in the paint, you need somebody on the perimeter. You got to go find those. Can you find them? Yes, you can. But you're right. They're not going to be from the big name schools more than likely. Those kids are going to be looking for another big name school to transfer to in the portal. You're going to be looking for kids at mid-majors. You're going to be looking at kids, dare I even say, because we've seen some success on some Division II kids. We've seen kids who have come through the portal out of D2 schools. You're going to have to get creative. You're going to have to find those kids. They're out there, but you got to go find them. You got and go get them and convince them to come to Wichita State. I think it's doable, but it's a task. It's not going to be the easy. We almost make it sound like all you got to do is walk out to the backyard.
Oh, sure. Yeah. You're competing against everybody else, right?
Yeah. Pick some apples off the tree. Well, it's not that easy, Jacob. It is not that easy.
But there's so many roads to success in this model. I mean, I'll use Harlem Beverly as an example again. That's a big program guy who just wasn't getting the opportunity he needed, right? And so that makes sense. But if you look at Colby Rogers, Cal Poly to Siena to Wichita State.
Right.
He's the best player. He might be good enough to play at Kansas, Paul. So those guys are out there. And I feel like for Wichita State, you start there. where are the and Jaquan Walton, right? They've been, whether it's Paul Mills, Isaac Brown, whoever it is in this modern era now, have been pretty good at going and identifying those guys. Now we got to see Paul Mills do it, right? We know Isaac Brown did a pretty good job at that, at finding guys. You're not going to find some of these guys on the transfer list, but they're really good players. That's what they have to keep doing. They just need more of it, and they need, they need two Colby Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
How can you go find two of those
Right,
players?
right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
No, I got
and we'll see if that's out there. And I'm very curious to know Friday when we talk to the Wichita State brass, like, does the program feel like it's where it needs to be? Like, let's say you can go out, you can identify the player likes Coach Mills, likes the system, likes the program, likes the history of Wichita State, the opportunity to play at Charles Koch Arena. Are they in position to finish the deal? And finishing the deal is where NIL comes in.
Right. And you've got to identify them, and you've got to be competitive. But for Wichita State fans, I guess you and I are both trying to be cautious on this and say, you may not get guys from Michigan State. You may not get guys from Syracuse. You may not get guys from UConn. You may not get those kind of guys, but there are good players out there. And it's amazing because through the years, you and I have both watched kids mature at a different rate. Some kids end up being really good at certain points of their lives, and you never know. But don't expect to see those recruits coming into Wichita State from the big name schools that are in the Sweet 16 at this point.
Right. Because it's not to be your big key role players. Andy.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Because those we just have, and I say temper expectation. I don't know what the appropriate expectation is. I don't know what it is. And that's what I have such a hard time with, right? Like, what do we need to set our expectation to for this program in that space? I think long-term and eventually you quite simply just put it where Memphis is, because there's no reason Memphis should be more successful at this than Wichita State. But we're not there yet, I don't think.
Right.
And we'll find out, but we're not there yet. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's get Carl wants to chime in.
All
Carl,
right.
welcome into Sports Daily. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Paul.
How you doing, Carl?
Good. I listen to you guys every morning. I don't call in much anymore, but I think you're missing a point here. We better decide how many leagues we're going to have. With all the teams moving, and we don't know, anybody knows what's going to happen with the ACC right now, or the ACC, excuse me. But I think that's another point that has to go into what you guys are talking about, because they don't know where the school that they're going to transfer to might be next year.
But a lot of times, Carl, you're talking about one-year situations. So, as long as they got a chance to play in the NCAA tournament, I think you're going to be okay. Here's the crazy thing is, where does Wichita State fit into all of that, right? Is the American going to be able to stay competitive? But the reality is Wichita State's, maybe this slight delay in all this is good for Wichita State, because one thing is abundantly clear. Wichita State is the most attractive when its men's basketball program is top notch and top caliber. So
exactly.
The ACC's delay may buy Wichita State enough time to rebuild that. And if there is one more seismic shift coming, and there may be one or two or none, probably one, then where does Wichita State land there? Well, you're going to want to be in the best position you can be with men's basketball, because right now is a very different situation, I think, than in 2017 when Wichita State joined the American, which at the time was the best non-Power 5 league. It's all very, go ahead.
Oh, I think when this all shakes out, you're going to have 4 24 league teams. And than
Well,
everybody
Wichita
else,
State probably
and I
isn't.
think
They're not going to fit into that anyway because they don't have football. So whatever happens there doesn't really pertain to Wichita State, unless the
Yeah,
Big
but
12 went and had like a basketball only portion, and then maybe. But Wichita State doesn't fit into that part anyway. It doesn't matter. Wichita State doesn't have football. You got to look more to the ACC, or sorry, the AAC, the Atlantic 10, the Big East, the Mountain West, maybe. That's where that stuff comes into play. It doesn't really matter what happens in the football portion of this because it doesn't pertain to Wichita State. We appreciate the call, Paul.
Sounds like Carl's almost making a case. And I'm not so sure that he's that far off of Wichita State going to the Big East eventually. I don't know, but they're a basketball.
Paul,
well, what?
I love the idea of that, but I don't think the Big East is knocking on the door right now.
Well, that's that. Well, I mean, look at Wichita State. Who would make a better league member at this point, DePaul or Wichita State?
I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. For travel, I don't know. Now, you asked me that question 4 or 5 years ago. It's a no-brainer, right?
Oh,
Wichita State was just as attractive outside of the fact that it's not a Catholic school.
Right.
Outside of the fact that it's not a Catholic school, Wichita State, when Creighton joined, was just as attractive as Creighton, right?
Oh, no
Now
question.
that league has become this power league. The only, I think UConn's for sure not a Catholic school. The rest are. I think Butler used to be, but maybe isn't anymore. But there's that obvious tie-in to the Big East, and so. That was always, but if they're done caring as much about that, then yeah, that's natural.
Right.
Anthony chimes in on the video stream and says the Atlantic 10. I think I'd rather be in the AAC than the Atlantic 10. The one thing the AAC does provide Wichita State, and even though Wichita State doesn't have football, the security of the league is probably tidier because of football. That it protects them a little bit. Now, does that make it the best fit? Not necessarily. And look, Memphis should have been a tournament team this year. FAU was, UAB got in. There's no reason the current collection of talent in the American can't make it a 2-3 bid league every year.
Yeah.
Wichita State needs to be a part of that, though. I think the AAC's banking on that a little bit, too, is that Wichita State helps make it that.
That's correct.
There's a lot of pressure right now in Wichita. No question. They got to be better next year. Absolutely have to be, and it starts right now in the transfer portal. And we will get the latest on that Friday when we're joined by Kevin Saul and Paul Mills. We will get to the bottom of it, see where things stand. How's it going? Maybe they come on here and make a fundraising pitch. I don't really know, but we'll find out when we talk to them. A bit of crazy. We haven't talked about anything else, Paul. So we got wild card. We'll hit another. We've been all college basketball. I didn't see that coming today, but I'm glad it did. That's all right. It's been a fun one.
We needed it. We needed it.
I want to get your take on Shohei because I haven't heard it yet. So we'll do a little of that next, maybe a couple other loose ends to tie it up here.
Gotcha.
Sports Daily on a Wednesday. Albracht and Savage coming right back.
90.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Glad to be here with you on this Wednesday edition. Okay, so Shohei Ohtani, Paul, comes out yesterday, gives probably as much as he reasonably can, does give a flat denial of knowing about any of this. Been a little back and forth. I know people are like, oh, he should answer questions. No, he shouldn't. Not when there's an investigation happening. That wouldn't be a smart thing for him to do. No lawyer on the planet's going to tell him to answer those questions while the investigation's happening anyway. So where do you stand with this? I am of the belief that we're not going to see anything as far as resolution goes. Gosh, I don't even know if it's going to happen this season, Paul. Like, that's a pretty big ask for a federal investigation to move that quickly. And then after that, Major League Baseball gets to investigate a little bit. Like, I think this is going to be a long time coming. I don't think it's really going to affect this season. I mean, maybe the back end. I'm not really sure. I think the biggest question in the short term becomes, how does it affect Ohtani this year as far as how he plays on the field? But there's not going to be anything of he will be suspended for X amount of time. I don't think, at least until the federal investigation's done. And I would bet it's even a little longer than that, if anything happens.
He's an innocent man, I think. I mean, how do we, until somebody shows, Well, listen, it only makes sense. You got a guy with $1 billion. Does he need to gamble and put all that in jeopardy? Ohtani is not a stupid man. You can tell by the way he's restructured his finances, everything he's got going. Would he put to risk all the endorsements? And by the way, they say he makes as much money with endorsements as he does with salary at this point. So does he seem like a man who would put all that in jeopardy? And I think to myself, I don't think he would. And I put myself in his shoes. So let's say Paul Savage signs a $1 billion contract, and I'm going to go play baseball in Japan. And I'm over there. I can't speak Japanese, so I have an interpreter, and they're helping me out. And I get over there, and I find out, well, wow, they've got some sports betting over here in Japan. That's pretty cool. I think I'll get involved. What do I know about soccer? What do I know about sumo wrestling? What do I know about all the sports that I'll be gambling on in Japan? All the sports that he would be gambling on, the only thing he knows anything about would be baseball. And I think he's probably smart enough not to jeopardize $1 billion worth of income to bet on a few baseball games. So to me, I look at this and I think he doesn't know enough about football to bet. He doesn't know enough about basketball to bet. He doesn't know enough about anything in sports to bet here in the United States. Why would he do it?
Well, the bets I've heard the bets are on cricket. I don't know, Paul.
I've got to give him the benefit of the doubt.
I would say that I join you in the sentiment that I'm highly doubtful that any of the betting happened on baseball games. On baseball games, betting's not legal in California. If you just have to bet that badly, funneling through to an illegal bookie. I mean, I don't understand the risk there, and I'm a bettor. I love to bet, but I don't understand the risk. Yeah. None of it makes sense is the problem.
That's the problem. None of it fits. None of it fits.
It's not believable that he would risk that much to make those bets.
It's not believable. That's correct.
It's not believable that this guy had access to his bank accounts and he didn't know it. The only believable story to me was the original story that has changed in that he was just trying to bail his buddy out who was in some trouble. That was the only one where I was like, yeah, okay, I could see that, right? Like I could see, oh, my guy's in trouble. Like you made a terrible decision. I'm going to help you out because I can. I'm in a position to do it. And then that blew up in his face.
But that doesn't mean he bet on baseball. That doesn't mean he bet.
No. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. I'm saying that's the only path here that makes any sense to this story.
But that may not be illegal.
It doesn't make sense.
That's right.
It doesn't make sense that somebody was able to take that money directly from his account. It doesn't make sense that Shohei Ohtani would just flat bet it himself with as much as he has on the line. Those two paths, which are now basically our two paths that remain standing, don't make any sense. So I would imagine that the truth is out there somewhere buried in all the different stories we've heard. Now everybody's in damage control mode. I don't know. The question becomes, did he himself bet on baseball? That's the only question that really matters from a sports perspective, because we all just want to know if he's going to play or get suspended. All the other stuff, I don't know. Fraud and all that stuff, they'll decide all that. I care greatly about that. I'm very interested in that. But from a perspective of sports, the only thing that matters is, did he bet on baseball?
Right.
And that does seem highly unlikely to me.
There is fraud in this case, but it's against Ohtani. It's against
potentially.
Him. But that's where I think the fraud is, because nothing is making sense to me. Now, you and I both seem to have a little bit of common sense, and I've always relied on your common sense. I think I have a little bit of common sense, and nothing makes sense in all of this. The amounts don't make sense. You got $1 billion. Betting up to $4 million over the course of months and months and months doesn't do anything for you. I wouldn't think it would do anything. I mean, there's not the thrill of the bet, not when you have $1 billion. That nothing at all in terms of this young man, his lifestyle, who he is, makes sense. What he is guilty of is putting his faith in the wrong person. Now, that he's guilty of. He may not be the best judge of character, but I guarantee you, That's where this ends. Nothing makes sense that shows or makes me think.
Well, I don't pretend to know.
Illegal.
Like maybe he's a degenerate gambler. I don't know.
I doubt it. I would sincerely doubt it.
I'm trying not to have a take on that because I have no idea. I'm only trying to like look at what's happening and try to understand it, which is wild. All right, we got to take our final break. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on tap today next.
Thank you, Wichita, for making Sports Daily the #1 sports talk on late morning radio. Wichita's most listened to sports radio. 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Want to listen to the NCAA March Madness games from Westwood One? You can on the Odyssey app, AUDACY.
Wichita's most listened to sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, that's it for us. Good show today, Paul.
That was fun.
Probably a little different direction than we thought, but
Yeah.
a lot of great thoughts and comments on the reshaping of some rosters, and Coach Cal sort of got the juices flowing there. Don't forget, Westwood One March Madness games are available all tournament long on the Odyssey app. Don't forget, also on the Odyssey app, you can listen to us here, Sports Daily. It's podcasted there for you. You can listen to it live. You got regular programming throughout the day today, including Bob and Jeff here locally. Tommy's back in tomorrow. Paul, appreciate it. For Jad and Paul, I'm Jacob. We'll see you tomorrow.